So this is the video reporting of Group 6, and I will start to discuss definition of good, defining good, and the functional definition of good. Definition of good. In the most contexts, the concept of good denotes the conduct that should be prepared when posed with a choice between possible action. It means the behavior of a person. It needs to take place to bring or favor during the time to perform with your choice between possible actions. Good is generally considered to be the opposite of evil and is of interest in the study of ethics, morality, philosophy, and religion. When we say ethics, it is a moral principles that govern a person's behavior, or it is a branch of knowledge that deals with moral principles, while morality, it is the extent to which an action is right or wrong. Philosophy is the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence, especially when considered as an academic discipline. Religion is the belief in and worship of a superhuman controlling power, especially a person, God of gods. Defining good, it is a benefit or advantage to someone or something, or which is morally right that we have a balance of good and evil. And now, let's continue to the functional definition of good. Based on the theory of good and the theory of right, the good is that which there is strongest reason to want or desire. For the right is that which an actor ought to do, which have a strongest reason to do, in the circumstances of his or her action. Now, they have three major types of good in ethics are deontological ethics, teleological ethics, and virtue-based. Deontological ethics holds that at least some acts are morally obligatory regardless of their consequences. While teleological ethics, from the Greek word telos, it means end, and logos, it means science. But this is the theory of morality that derives duty or moral obligation from what is good or desirable as an end to be achieved. And the last is virtue-based. Is a person rather than action based on the virtue or moral character of a person carrying out an action rather than an ethical duties and rules or the consequences of particular actions. So this is the end of my discussion, and may I call Ms. Rudelin Torres to answer this question. What is ethics, morality, philosophy, and religion? Please comment your answers from this video. Thank you, and see you to the next reporter.
Philosophical definition of goodness. In recent work in philosophical theology, perfect goodness is understood as a practical excellence, an excellence concerned with desire, character traits, and actions. So, understandably, primarily in context in which the problem of evil is at issue. It is an interest of moral philosophy to adequately and accurately define the meaning of goodness. This is important because the meaning of goodness sets the foundation for an ethical theory. The branch of ethics interested in the meaning of goodness is called value theory. According to Plato, perfect goodness is the form of good upon which everything that has being is ontologically and causally dependent. So moral objectivism holds that there are objective universal moral principles that are valid for all people. So, according to Louis Budgeman, proposes one such moral principle that he believes is binding upon all human beings. It is morally wrong to torture people just for the fun of it. And also, moral objectivism is the position that certain acts are objectively right or wrong, so it is an independent of human opinion. So here are an examples of moral objectivism. An example of moral objectivism is that it is morally wrong to torture people or kill innocent persons for fun. Another example is that everyone must keep their promises and honor contracts in order to live in a society.
Good day everyone. For today's video, I will discuss about the moral nihilism and moral relativism. Moral nihilism, also known as ethical nihilism. Meta-ethical nihilism viewed that nothing is intrinsically moral or immoral. Killing someone for whatever reason is neither inherently right nor inherently wrong. Moral nihilists consider morality to be human construction. Moral nihilism distinct from moral relativism, which does allow for action to be right or wrong, relative to be particular, culture, or individual. Moral nihilism applies moral skepticism. Moral nihilism, nothing is morally right. There are several forms that moral nihilism, error theory, and expressivism. Ethical nihilism rejects the possibility of absolute moral or ethical values, good and evil, or vague and related values are simply the result of social and emotional pressures. Existential nihilism, the most well-known view, affirms that life has no intrinsic meaning or value. Types of nihilism. Moral nihilism views that morality does not exist. Therefore, no action necessarily preferable to any other. Existential nihilism, to believe that life has no intrinsic meaning or value. Epistemology nihilism, which all knowledge is denied. Metaphysical nihilism, theory that there are might to be no objects at all. Moral nihilism, nothing is right or wrong, there are no standard of behavior. Example, the killing of the innocent is neither right nor wrong. This leads into absurdism or to be covered later. So next, moral relativism. What is moral relativism? Moral relativism can be three different types of positions: descriptive, meta-ethical, or normative, depending on the differences of moral judgments among a certain people or cultures. Types of ethical relativism: cultural ethical relativism, individual ethical relativism. Ethical relativism is the doctrine that in the moral rightness and wrongness of action varies from society to society, and that there are no absolute universal moral standards depending on all men at all times. Moral relativism. Each society has its own moral code. There are no universal standards, only local principles. There is no such thing as objective morality.
That's all, thank you.
Knowing the good and doing the good. So, goodness is the quality of being morally or virtuous. Good means a lack of self-centeredness. It means the ability to empathize with other people, to feel compassion for them, and to put their needs before your own. It means, if necessary, sacrificing your own well-being for the sake of others. So, 4.1 goods. So there are types of goods. So, private goods, public goods, common resources, and natural monopolies. So, private goods. Private goods are those whose ownership is restricted to a group or individual that purchase the good for their own consumption. Public good. A public good is a good that is both an excludable and non-rivalrous for goods and cannot be barred from the accessing for using them, for failing to pay them. Then, the common resources. Common resources are those that no one individual or organization can lay claim to. And natural monopolies. A natural monopoly is a monopoly in industry in which high infrastructural costs and other barriers to entry relative to the size of the market give the largest supplier in the industry, often the first supplier in a market, and overwhelming advantages over potential competitors. That is all. Thank you.
Now, let us examine the two types of good in philosophy in which philosophers have classified. There are two things we might imply when we say something is good or valuable. The first one is intrinsic good. A thing is said to be intrinsically good if it is worthwhile not because it leads to something else, but for its own sake alone. That is, good in itself. An intrinsic good is not required to lead to anything else, create a certain result, or produce a reward. So, they are not pursued because we want to use them as a means to get other good. Therefore, things in this category are self-sufficient. According to George Edward Moore, Anything that is intrinsically good must be objective. That is, if we classified anything to have the value of intrinsic good, such a thing could not be said to be evil or bad by other people. However, philosophers do not agree on those things that could be classified as intrinsic good or having intrinsic value. Some philosophers like the hedonist, Plato, Aristotle, and Mill claim such things are abstract in nature. They listed happiness, pleasure, knowledge, virtues as things that have intrinsic value. This question is for Ms. Ariane Nicole Ponce. Is happiness actually intrinsically good? Given the situation that it is claimed that some people derive happiness when evil happens to others. Please share your thoughts on the comment section. Okay, let's now proceed. Some philosophers argued that concrete things have intrinsic values. For instance, Elizabeth Anderson said things like laurel, Jabaldon can be classified as intrinsic good. Also, Shelley Kagan opined that historically significant things could be something categorized as intrinsically valuable. He said the pen Abraham Lincoln used to sign the Emancipation Proclamation could be said to have intrinsic value. However, it is worthy to note that it is disputed if pleasure, happiness, joy, and knowledge are intrinsically good. It is assumed that when someone has the knowledge, it is for a purpose. For instance, having knowledge of music might be to compose a good song. Knowledge of driving might be to drive safely. In response to this, philosophers claim there is some intrinsic good that can as well be instrumental good. Hence, they have double values, intrinsic and instrumental, depending on how they are being viewed. Remember the Kantian's notion that goodwill is what can have intrinsic value. Therefore, any action that is not emanating from goodwill is not valuable. On Kagan's pen intrinsic value, it is best to respond in line with Ben Bradley that it is not the pen that has intrinsic value, but the state of affairs involving that pen. That is, the pen was used to sign the Emancipation Proclamation. Alright, let's now proceed to instrumental good. It is the value that something has, in virtue of being a means to an end. In other words, instrumental good is the moral values considered as a means to achieve other moral goods. The best way to explain instrumental good, also called intrinsic good, is to illustrate thus. For example, you are a student of Norso Pamplona campus offering this course, GE8-Ethics. You got this course material for you to read. You want to read so that you can know the course. You want to know it in order to pass it. You want to pass the course in order to graduate with a good grade. You want to have a good grade so that you will be able to get a good job. You want to get a good job because you want to live happily. Looking at the chain of actions here, it is obvious that one action leads to the other. That is to show the antecedent is instrumental to the consequence. Let's have another example. Think about money. Is money good? Well, it is good, but only because we can use it to purchase other items. It's not good all on its own. That is, considered as instrumentally good. As a result, people want money because they can utilize it. It has a purpose, and it allows them to obtain what they desire. That's the end of my topic, so I will now give the floor to the next presenter.
This is one of the questions I wondered when I find myself sometimes without much meaning in life. What is good or bad? Why do such differences arise? Most importantly, who decides? The philosophy of good and bad is a duality of opposites, and we can eliminate the opposition between them by recognizing emptiness. In the sense of recognizing good and bad as two conflicting principles, but not reality, it can be seen more clearly. Determining if something is good or bad is a decision, a verdict. And this decision helps us not only in decision making, but they also shape us into the type of humans as we grow us up. For example, we all know that killing is bad, but if it kills one to save the others, how do you choose? This may be a very far-fetched example, but equally difficult decisions do play a role in our lives. Decisions like this make it hard for us to live a life of only doing good. We cannot avoid the bad guys, because if we can stop ourselves from turning the bad guys, the universe will be out of balance. After all, there is no good or evil. There are actions, there are consequences, and society's perceptions. Our actions are good if they are for the benefits of others, but if they're bad for anyone, they're bad.
Virtue comes from the Latin root vir for man. At first, virtue meant manliness or valor, but over time it settled into the sense of moral excellence. Virtue can also mean excellence in general. Virtue is moral excellence. A virtue is a trait or quality that is deemed to be morally good and thus is valued as a foundation of principle and good moral being. In other words, it is a behavior that shows high moral standards, doing what is right and avoiding what is wrong. Example of virtues: honesty, courage, compassion, generosity, fidelity, integrity, fairness, and prudence. Importance of virtue. Virtues are important because they are the basic qualities necessary for our well-being and happiness. By recognizing the importance of virtues in our lives, it will lead to better communication, understanding, and acceptance between us and our fellow man. Kantianism. Kantianism is defined as a branch of philosophy that follows the works of Immanuel Kant, who believed that rational beings have dignity and should be respected. A philosophy of rational morality, including the God and freedom, based on the works of Kant, is an example of Kantianism. Kant's philosophy. His moral philosophy is a philosophy of freedom. Without human freedom, thought Kant, moral appraisal and moral responsibility would be impossible. Kant believes that a person could not act otherwise than he is or her act can have no moral worth. Kantian ethics. Kant argued that the most things we think of as good are not always good. Intelligence, wealth, etc. could always be used as evil. For Kant, the only thing that is always good in itself is a goodwill. This is a kind of drive to do the right thing, whatever it is. We should want to act in a certain way because it is right, not because the consequences. The pros and cons of Kantianism. Case for Kantianism: it is rational, procedures universal, moral guidelines, all persons treated as moral equals. Case against: sometimes no single rule fully explains a situation, no way to resolve conflict between two different rules. Kantianism allows no exceptions to moral laws, no binding the rules. Importance of Kantianism. One of the most important aspects of Kant's theory of experience is that it is possible to have knowledge of the world because the world as we experience it conforms to the condition and the possibility of experience.